I thought my wedding day was perfect until my sister grabbed the microphone and told 200 guests that my marriage was doomed. But when my 8-year-old son stood up and asked one simple question, every secret in that room came crashing down. My name is Melora, and if you'd told me that my second wedding would end with my sister's marriage imploding instead of mine, I would have laughed in your face. But sometimes the people who throw stones forget they live in glass houses, and my sister Vivian had built herself a crystal palace. Willowbrook Country Club, 7 in the evening, champagne flowing, the band playing At Last by Etta James. My new husband Grant holding my hand, my son Dexter in his little tuxedo sneaking extra cake, and my sister standing up with that smile she gets right before she ruins someone's day. She'd perfected that smile over 37 years, usually aiming it at me. "This marriage won't last, just like her last one," she announced to everyone, including my boss, my neighbors, and Grant's elderly grandmother who'd flown in from Seattle. The worst part? My own mother nodded along like this was appropriate wedding reception conversation. But here's the thing about kids, they see everything and they remember everything. And my 8-year-old Dexter had been watching his Uncle Preston very carefully the week before. What he saw was about to flip our entire family upside down. Before I tell you how my wedding reception turned into a spectacular revelation that nobody saw coming, you need to understand the players in this drama. There was Vivian, my older sister, the one who married her college sweetheart Preston and never let anyone forget how perfect their life was. Preston, the successful surgeon who my parents treated like the son they never had. My mother Judith, who still introduced me as my divorced daughter Melora 3 years after my split. And then there was Grant, the man brave enough to marry me despite my baggage, and Dexter, my son who turned out to be the hero none of us expected. That night started as my second chance at happiness and ended with my sister's first taste of humiliation. And the beautiful irony? The very thing she mocked me for, marrying the wrong person and not seeing the signs, was exactly what she'd been doing for 15 years. The reception hall at Willowbrook Country Club glowed with warm candlelight and white roses, exactly the way I dreamed it would be. Every table had been perfectly set with gold-rimmed plates and crystal glasses that caught the light like tiny diamonds. After my messy divorce 3 years ago, I never thought I'd be here again, wearing white, believing in forever. Grant squeezed my hand under the table as we watched our guests enjoying their dinner. The catering staff moved silently between tables, refilling wine glasses and serving the braised salmon we'd spent 3 tasting sessions choosing. "You look radiant, Melora," he whispered against my ear, his breath warm and familiar. For the first time in years, I actually believed someone when they said I was beautiful. "Mom, you keep smiling weird," Dexter said, poking at his salmon with suspicious eyes, "like when you're trying not to cry at movies." "These are happy tears, baby," I told him, smoothing down his sandy brown hair that refused to stay put despite the gel. Grant had helped him apply earlier. "Sometimes people cry when they're really happy." "That's illogical," he declared, making Grant laugh. My son had been going through a Star Trek phase, and everything was either logical or illogical these days. My mother Judith sat at the family table, her perpetual look of mild disappointment temporarily replaced with something approaching approval. She wore the navy dress I'd helped her pick out, though she'd complained it showed too much arm for a woman her age. "At least this venue is respectable," she'd said earlier while adjusting the centerpiece at her table. "Not like that beach wedding idea you had initially. Sand in everyone's shoes, wind ruining hair, completely impractical." From her, this counted as enthusiasm. Vivian commanded attention at her table, as she always did. Her surgeon husband Preston nodded along to whatever story she was telling, probably about their recent vacation to Switzerland or their daughter's acceptance into the gifted program. She wore a burgundy dress that cost more than my wedding dress, a fact she'd made sure to mention during the rehearsal dinner. "It's Valentino," she'd said, as if I should be impressed. "Preston insisted I get something special for your big day." She'd always been the success story of our family. Married her college sweetheart right after graduation, had 2 beautiful kids who never seemed to misbehave, lived in a house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. During my first marriage's collapse, she'd been the first to say, "I saw this coming, Melora. You always rush into things without thinking them through. Mom, why does Aunt Vivian keep looking at you and shaking her head?" Dexter asked, his voice carrying that innocent honesty that only children possess. I'd noticed it too. Every few minutes, Vivian would glance our way, whisper something to Preston, and give a little shake of her head like she was watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. She's probably just emotional, sweetheart. Weddings do that to people, I replied, though I knew better. Vivian didn't do emotional. She did, calculated. The band played jazzy versions of love songs, filling the space with warmth and energy. Grant's family mingled easily with mine, his parents deep in conversation with my Uncle Robert about their mutual love of fishing. His mother had pulled me aside earlier to give me her own mother's pearl bracelet, saying, "Every woman needs something that's been loved by generations." It was the kind of gesture my own mother would never think to make. Grant's cousin's kids were teaching Dexter some complicated hand-clapping game at the children's table, and his laughter rang out pure and unguarded. My first husband's family had treated Dexter like an inconvenience, someone to be managed rather than celebrated. But Grant's family had embraced him from day one, his brother immediately declaring himself Uncle Mike and showing up to every one of Dexter's baseball games since we'd gotten engaged. "Your family is wonderful," I told Grant, watching his father demonstrate what appeared to be a very enthusiastic fishing rod cast to my bewildered aunt. "They're your family now, too," Grant said, lifting my hand to kiss my wedding ring. "All of this is yours now. The good, the crazy, and whatever Uncle Ted is doing over by the chocolate fountain." We both looked over to see his Uncle Ted attempting to convince the catering staff that strawberries weren't the only thing that could be dipped in chocolate, holding what appeared to be a dinner roll on a skewer. "I'm going to pretend I didn't see that," Grant decided, and we both laughed. Everything felt different this time around. Mature, considered, real. We'd spent a year in couples counseling before getting engaged, working through my trust issues and his tendency to avoid conflict. We'd had the hard conversations about money, about raising Dexter, about what we wanted our life to look like. This wasn't a fairy tale romance. It was better. It was two people who'd been broken, choosing to build something together with the pieces. The trouble started during the toast portion of the evening. Grant's best man, Michael, had just finished a heartfelt speech about second chances and finding love when you least expect it. He'd made everyone laugh with the story of Grant's first attempt to ask me out, which involved him accidentally ordering 5 coffees because he was so nervous he kept forgetting he'd already ordered. The room was warm with laughter and champagne bubbles, that perfect wedding, a moment when everyone feels connected by joy. Then Vivian stood up, champagne glass in hand, without being invited to speak. "I'd like to say something about my baby sister," she announced, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when about to be cruel. The microphone wasn't necessary. Vivian had trained her voice to command attention in hospital boardrooms and charity galas. The room quieted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Grant's hand found mine under the table, his thumb rubbing small circles against my palm. "Melora has always been an optimist," Vivian began, swaying slightly on her designer heels. She'd had more champagne than usual, probably 5 or 6 glasses by my count. Her perfectly styled auburn hair caught the light as she turned to address different sections of the room. Even after her first spectacular failure of a marriage, here she is, trying again. Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the crowd like a wave of secondhand embarrassment. Some guests shifted in their seats. Others suddenly became very interested in their dessert plates. Grant's grandmother looked confused, probably wondering if this was some American wedding tradition she didn't understand. My mother actually nodded, as if this was appropriate wedding speech material. She sat there in her navy dress, hands folded properly in her lap, giving Vivian the same encouraging look she used to give her during school plays. "But that's my sister," Vivian continued, gesturing with her glass and nearly spilling champagne on the couple at the next table. "She never learns. She jumps in head first without thinking about consequences. Remember when she decided to be a painter? That lasted 6 months. Or when she was going to start that organic food business? 3 months. And we all know how her first marriage ended." She paused for effect, and in that silence, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. So here's to hoping this one lasts longer than the first. Though, honestly, I give it 2 years, tops. Maybe 3 if Grant has exceptional patience. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 faces turned to stare at me, some with pity, others with shock, a few with that horrible curiosity people get when witnessing a car crash. The band had stopped mid-song, the drummer's hand frozen above his cymbal. Even the catering staff stood frozen, champagne bottles held mid-pour. Grant started to stand, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. His face had gone from confused to furious in the span of Vivian's speech. "Don't," I whispered, my voice shaking as I grabbed his arm. "It'll make it worse. Please." But Vivian wasn't done. She had that glassy-eyed determination of someone who'd been holding something in for too long and had chosen the absolute worst moment to let it out. "I mean, Grant seems nice enough," she said, now addressing him directly. "But you have to understand what you've signed up for. Melora has a pattern. She confuses attention with love, and when reality sets in, when the daily grind becomes too much, well, she bails. Just ask her ex-husband. Oh wait, he's not here because he's already moved on with someone who doesn't have a kid to complicate things." Tears burned my eyes, hot and humiliating. This was supposed to be my day, my fresh start, my chance to show everyone that I could get it right. The wedding coordinator looked horrified, her hands fluttering uselessly at her sides. My cousin Beth had her phone out, probably recording this disaster for posterity. I could already imagine it going viral. "Sister destroys bride at wedding reception." Someone had to say it, my mother murmured, loud enough for the tables around us to hear. Better she hears it from family. Preston tried to pull Vivian down to her seat, his face red with embarrassment. "Honey, that's enough," he said, but she shook him off. "No, Preston, it's not enough. I've watched her mess up everything she missed. Touches for 34 years. First marriage, disaster. Every job she's had, she quits. She dragged that poor boy." She pointed at Dexter, who looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair, through a divorce because she couldn't make it work. "And now she's doing it all over again," Grant's mother gasped audibly. His father stood up, ready to intervene, but Grant held up a hand to stop him. I could feel the anger radiating off my new husband in waves, but he stayed seated because I'd asked him to. "Vivian, you need to stop," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying in the silent room. "Why? Because it's your special day?" She laughed, ugly and sharp. "Every day is your special day, Melora. Everyone always rushing to fix your mistakes, to make excuses for you. Poor Melora. Her husband left her. Poor Melora, single mom struggling to make it work. But did anyone ask why he left?" I stood up slowly, my legs shaking beneath my wedding dress. The weight of 200 pairs of eyes felt crushing, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My hands trembled as I set down my napkin, the small gesture somehow feeling monumental. Grant stood with me immediately, protective and furious, his hand on the small of my back steadying me. "We're leaving," Grant said quietly, his voice controlled but deadly serious. "We don't need to listen to this." I looked at Vivian standing there, swaying slightly, her face flushed with champagne and righteousness. This was my sister, the person who was supposed to protect me, support me, celebrate with me. Instead, she'd chosen my wedding day to unleash years of resentment I didn't even know she harbored. "You're right, Vivian," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I did fail at my first marriage. I have quit jobs. I'm not perfect like you." She smirked, raising her glass as if I'd just proven her point. But before I could continue, before I could walk out of my own reception with whatever dignity I had left, a small voice cut through the tension like a knife through wedding cake. "Aunt Vivian?" Dexter had stood up on his chair, his little bow tie crooked, his face serious in that way only 8-year-olds can manage when they have something important to say. His Spider-Man socks were visible above his dress shoes, a detail I'd fought and lost against that morning. "Should I tell everyone why Uncle Preston came to our house last week?" The champagne glass slipped from Vivian's hand, shattering on the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. The golden liquid spread across the hardwood like spilled secrets. Preston's face went from red to white in an instant, like someone had drained all the blood from his body. "Dexter, buddy, that was just a work thing, remember? I told you it was just work." "No, you didn't," Dexter said, his voice clear and certain. "You said it was a secret. You said Aunt Vivian couldn't know you were there. You made Mom promise not to tell." Vivian's face transformed from smug to panicked, her eyes darting between Preston and Dexter. "What is he talking about, Preston? When were you at Melora's house?" "Honey, it's not what you think," Preston started, but his voice cracked on the last word. "Mom says secrets that hurt people always come out," Dexter continued, still standing on his chair like a tiny prosecutor. "And Aunt Vivian is hurting my mom right now, so I think the secret should come out." My mind raced back to last Tuesday afternoon. I'd been home early from work, preparing wedding favors at the kitchen table when Preston had shown up unexpectedly. Grant was at work, and Dexter was supposed to be doing homework in his room. Preston had looked disheveled, desperate. Nothing like the composed surgeon who usually had everything under control. "Melora, please, I need to talk to you," he'd begged, pushing his way into my house before I could object. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. He looked like he'd been driving around for hours, working up the courage to face me. I'd sent Dexter to his room immediately, but he must have been listening from the stairs. He'd always been too curious for his own good, a trait that usually got him in trouble but today might save me. "Dexter? Sweetheart, why don't you sit down?" I said gently, but he shook his head. "No, Mom, she's mean to you. She's always mean to you, and you just take it. But Uncle Preston said what he did was why your first marriage ended, and that's not fair that she's blaming you." The room gasped collectively. Grant's hand tightened on my back. My mother's face had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "That's enough, Dexter," Preston said, his voice taking on an edge of authority that might work on hospital interns but had no effect on my son. "You were crying," Dexter announced to the silent reception hall. "Real tears, like when I fell off my bike and scraped my whole leg. You kept saying sorry to my mom over and over." Vivian stumbled backward, her perfect composure finally cracking like ice under pressure. "Preston, what the hell is he talking about?" I found my voice, steady and clear, no longer shaking. The truth wanted to come out, had been wanting to come out for 3 years. "Your husband came to apologize, Vivian. He came to clear his conscience before my wedding because the guilt was eating him alive." "Melora, don't!" Preston pleaded. But it was too late. The dam had broken. "He brought papers with him," Dexter added helpfully. "I saw them when he left them on the coffee table. They had a lawyer's name on them." "He was crying," Dexter announced to the silent reception hall, his young voice carrying with devastating clarity. "Real tears, like when I fell off my bike and skinned both knees. He kept saying sorry to my mom, saying he ruined everything." Vivian's voice cracked like a whip. "Preston, what is he talking about? What did you ruin?" I found my voice steady and clear, 3 years of buried truth finally rising to the surface. "Your husband came to apologize, Vivian, for the affair he had during my first marriage. With Rachel, my ex-husband's sister. The affair that destroyed my marriage when she told my ex that if I couldn't keep my own family from betraying me, how could I be trusted in our relationship?" Gasps echoed through the room like a wave. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Grant's parents exchanged stunned looks. The wedding coordinator dropped her clipboard, papers scattering across the floor. "That's a lie," Vivian said, but her voice wavered, uncertain. "Preston would never. We were happy. We've always been happy. He knew the whole time you were blaming me for rushing into marriage, for being reckless, for not being good enough," I continued, each word feeling like a weight lifting off my chest. "He sat at family dinners while you called me a failure. He listened to you mock my divorce at Christmas, at birthdays, at every family gathering for 3 years, knowing his affair with Rachel created the chaos that ended my marriage," Preston stammered, reaching for Vivian. "Baby, I can explain. It was a mistake. One time, it meant nothing." "One time?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Preston, you had an affair with her for 6 months. You met her at my house during family barbecues. You exchanged numbers at Dexter's 5th birthday party. You used your medical conferences as cover stories. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks, the soft hum of the air conditioning, someone's phone vibrating against a table. "There's more," Dexter piped up, innocent to the destruction he was causing. "He brought papers. Mom made him leave, but I saw them on the table. They said divorce attorney at the top, and there was another paper that said something about custody." Vivian stumbled backward, her designer heels catching on the hem of her dress. Divorce attorney? Preston. What is he talking about? Preston's face crumbled entirely. Vivian, please, let me explain. Not here, not like this. Explain what? Vivian's voice rose to a shriek. That you had an affair? That you destroyed my sister's marriage and then let me torture her for it? Or that you're planning to leave me? The papers were from Steinberg and Associates. Dexter added helpfully, his 8-year-old memory surprisingly precise. I remember because it sounded like the name of the law firm on that television show, Mom Watches. I knew that firm. They specialized in high-asset divorces, the kind where wealthy men tried to hide their money before filing, the kind where custody battles got ugly and expensive. You were going to leave me? Vivian's voice broke completely. You sat there while I humiliated my sister at her wedding, knowing you were planning to leave me? Preston's silence was answer enough. Tell her why, I said quietly. Tell her what you told me on Tuesday. Tell her about Monica. Who's Monica? Vivian demanded, mascara now streaming down her face in black rivers. She's my surgical resident, Preston admitted, his voice barely audible. She's pregnant, 4 months. I was going to wait until after Melora's wedding to tell you. I didn't want to ruin the family event. The irony of that statement hung in the air like a poison cloud. He didn't want to ruin the family event, so he let his wife destroy it instead. Vivian laughed, high and hysterical. Pregnant? Your mistress is pregnant? She looked around the room at 200 stunned faces, then back at Preston. You knocked up a resident while I was organizing charity galas and pretending we had the perfect marriage? It just happened, Preston said weakly. Monica understands me in a way you never did. Get out, Vivian said, her voice deadly quiet. Then louder, get out! Vivian, please, we can talk about this. Get out! She screamed, picking up a champagne bottle from the nearest table and raising it like a weapon. Get out before I do something that will require your surgical skills to fix. Preston looked around the room at 200 stunned faces, his reputation as the perfect son-in-law crumbling in real time. He straightened his tie, a pointless gesture given the circumstances, and walked out, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The door closed behind him with a decisive click that somehow sounded like the end of everything Vivian had built her identity around. Vivian collapsed into a chair, her burgundy Valentino dress pooling around her like spilled wine. Her perfectly styled hair had come undone, strands sticking to her tear-stained face. The sister who'd spent years making me feel inferior for my failed marriage was watching hers crumble in front of everyone she'd wanted to impress. The room remained frozen, 200 guests unsure whether to leave, comfort someone, or pretend nothing had happened. The band stood awkwardly on stage, instruments silent, probably wondering if they should pack up or wait for someone to tell them what to do. I walked over to Vivian, my wedding dress rustling in the silence. Grant and Dexter followed, our little family unit approaching the woman who'd tried to destroy our celebration. Each step felt deliberate, important, like I was choosing who I wanted to be in this moment. I could be cruel right now, I said quietly but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. I could say all the things you've said to me, that you should have seen it coming, that you rushed into trusting the wrong person, that you're a failure as a wife. She looked up at me, mascara stained and broken, no longer the composed surgeon's wife who had everything figured out. But I won't. Because I know what it feels like to have your world fall apart while everyone watches. I know what it's like to discover the person you trusted most has been lying to your face. The difference is, when mine fell apart, I didn't have a sister's support. You do. I held out my hand. She stared at it for a long moment, tears flowing fresh down her cheeks. Then, with shaking fingers, she took it. I'm so sorry, Melora, she sobbed, standing up and falling into my arms. I'm so sorry for everything. For blaming you, for the cruel things I said, for not being there when you needed me. My mother stood up, looking older than her 62 years, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Melora, I owe you an apology too. I believed the story that was easier to believe, that you were careless with your marriage, not that you were betrayed by family. I failed you as a mother. We all failed her. Vivian said, pulling back to look at the crowd. I stood up here to humiliate my sister on her wedding day because I was jealous. Jealous that she had the courage to start over, to find real love, while I was trapped in a lie I was too proud to admit. Grant cleared his throat, raising his champagne glass. If I may, I'd like to make a toast. The room shifted its attention to him, grateful for someone to take charge, to second chances, to truth coming out, even when it's painful, to little boys who protect their mothers. He ruffled Dexter's hair, making him smile for the first time since he'd stood on that chair. And to my wife, who shows grace even when she has every right not to, who teaches us that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Glasses raised tentatively around the room. Someone started clapping, then another, until the entire reception hall filled with applause. Not the polite applause of wedding guests, but something deeper, more genuine, like they'd witnessed something profound. The band leader approached the microphone. How about we play something for the bride and groom's first dance? As the opening notes of At Last began again, Grant led me to the dance floor. That was quite a reception, he whispered, pulling me close. Not exactly what we planned. I laughed, finally able to find humor in the chaos. No, he agreed, spinning me gently. It was better. It was real. Your family just had 3 years of therapy in 15 minutes. Other couples began joining us on the dance floor. My mother danced with Grant's father, both of them looking relieved the drama was over. Vivian sat at our table with Dexter, who was showing her his collection of Pokémon cards he'd hidden in his suit pocket, their heads bent together in concentration. Mom, did I do okay? Dexter asked later, tugging on my dress as we cut the cake. I knelt down, pulling him into a hug. You did perfectly, sweetheart. Sometimes the truth needs a brave little voice to set it free. I didn't mean to make Aunt Vivian cry, he said, his voice small. Those were healing tears, baby. Sometimes people need to cry out the poison before they can feel better. Vivian spent the rest of the reception at our table, no longer the perfect sister with all the answers, just my sister starting over. And I knew exactly how that felt. The next morning, Preston's belongings were on the lawn of their perfect house. The divorce papers he'd been preparing backfired spectacularly when Vivian hired the best divorce attorney in the state. It turned out Monica wasn't his first affair, just the first one to get pregnant. The investigations revealed a pattern of behavior that would cost him everything in the divorce. But that night, none of that mattered. What mattered was that my family, broken and imperfect as we were, had finally chosen truth over appearances. My wedding reception became the night we all stopped pretending, and in that messy, painful honesty, we found something we'd never had before: genuine connection. If you've made it this far in my story, you know that family isn't always easy. Sometimes the people who should support us the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But grace, real grace, can transform even the worst moments into opportunities for healing. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that their broken pieces can still build something beautiful. Comment below with your own stories of family drama that turned into unexpected blessings. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real, raw stories about the messy, beautiful truth of being human. Remember, you're not alone in your struggles, and sometimes the worst day of your life is just the beginning of something better.